necessarily so, and discussed some of the reasons why we want people to understand why it's important. I would be remiss not to acknowledge the fact that the State House of Representatives has in fact taken up House Bill 1316 in committee over the past couple of weeks, also had an executive session. And after talking with Shauna a little bit coming into the day's program, we've got more than a few things to say about what's gone on recently. So kindly excuse me if I get a little animated in the next couple of minutes here.
That's fine.
First, to give a little bit of background for the audience, on Wednesday afternoon, February the 18th, as we record this, the New Hampshire House Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee held an executive session where they took up, by my count, it was 5, maybe 6 different bills, including House Bill 1316 about autism data privacy. And let's see, during the committee session, yada, yada, yada. As times and technology and processing change, we need to be updating the data privacy bills, or laws, excuse me, just from a fundamental standpoint. Case in point, look at what happened with Covenant Health and their subsidiary, St. Joseph's Hospital in nearby Nashua, in having a massive data breach late last year. But it goes beyond that. There's an additional layer to this, that House Bill 1316 was also an attempt to address some of the continued misrepresentation, misinformation being spread about autism. And fundamental protections for the autistic community are particularly key now more than ever. Because as I point out, look at what happened in Minneapolis that we just mentioned. We cannot be having that going on here. Historically speaking, this administration is directly channeling Nazi Germany and scapegoating different groups, including the autistic community, with misrepresentation, misinformation. And, oh, by the way, it came out mid-January, a study published in the journal The Lancet of European scientists and professionals that took up the matter of does Tylenol cause autism. They reaffirmed what the original study said, that there is no direct connection there. That yes, caution should be used in those cases, but it directly counters what our very own administration was putting out last fall about there being a direct link. There still is not.
Yeah, and they came back and said that there is no link, right? After putting all that information out and terrifying pregnant women, mothers of autistic individuals, and women in general, who that is the way that they manage their pain. That is the only option that women have to safely manage pain that is over the counter, right?
Yeah.
And so it is really imperative also, I would say, to really do your own digging on information that's coming out.
Oh, definitely.
Do your own research, right? Because right now we are giving information and receiving information that may not always be accurate. And so I think in a time when it is so easy to get information, it's also really hard to weed through what is actually accurate information.
During the executive session about House Bill 1316 on Wednesday afternoon, committee member State Representative Mazer motioned the bill should be inexpedient to legislate. In layman's terms, here in New Hampshire, that means effectively kill it. Her insistence was that no additional data protections are needed, that it's already written into existing federal law. The current administration doesn't care about those laws. They will go around above and through them given an opportunity to. And that no singular group should be singled out within the discussion. The problem is they're already singling us out in the first place. And then then she's throwing a fit because we're trying to protect our families, our friends, our neighbors, people within our community. Madam Representative, refusing to change with the times is incredibly short-sighted. Our medical data is already at risk because of change in technology and practices. Additionally, what you do not understand in the discussion of House Bill 1316, it isn't about the existing data protection laws nationally. The main reason for House Bill 1316 is to counter the type of data collection that was included in the National Autism Registry proposed by USDHHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. last spring. The original Autism Registry was requiring non-consensual data collection for a registry to study and cure autism. Excuse me, that sounds incredibly like eugenics. The original Autism Registry proposal was made extremely underdefined, and there was no guarantee to prevent misuse. Oh, and I go on. Both historical context, Germany in the late 1930s and early 40s, and the action/comments of RFK Jr. and allies are a major red flag. Also, it is seriously alarming just last month to see that U.S. citizen and Minneapolis resident Alaya Rahman was assaulted and arrested by U.S. government law enforcement officers for being in the wrong place, and she got in their way.
You made an eloquent statement there. Yeah. And what I would go on to say is that anybody in the community listening right now that is either autistic themselves or in community with autistics, sharing a life with an autistic individual, having autistic children, there is no need to change who you are. And I am so sorry that that is what you are hearing, and that, these conversations are so important.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And I think the more we start to have them and keep having them, the better. I think that HB 1316 is a really important bill, and I think is the right step forward in protecting autistic individuals and residents of New Hampshire.
Oh, and actually, you take my next point right out of you took the word right out of my mouth on the next point, because that's what I go on to saying too, that I believe that it certainly isn't going to fix all of it overnight. No. Certainly not, but it's certainly a good step towards protecting our fellow autistic residents. By recommending ITL, you are opening New Hampshire residents with autism to the whims of President Trump and his allies. You are also potentially opening us up to being statistical footnotes if history continues to repeat itself. And my question, and this came up during the exec session, is to Representative Lamont Tang, and I apologize if I mispronounced it. her proposal was to have a work session in regard to House Bill 1316 about autism data privacy, also about House Bill 1317, which was a broader medical data privacy bill.
Yep.
Heard during the same exec session a little bit further on.
Yep.
What did she see in terms of potential that could be combined?
Yes.
Is that something that could be a template overall that we could start from here?
Definitely. And 1317.
Go ahead.
1317 was something that I brought forward with Heath Howard as well, because the disability community is a vast and large community of incredible individuals with all different needs and strengths. And so I felt it imperative to also not just support and protect that community, but the larger mental health and disability community.
Oh, for sure.
And so I think that Representative LeMontagne it was a really good thought, right? That maybe we don't have all of the information we need. Can we bring this forward and do a work study and maybe look at combining these bills?
And her commentary, and my take on her commentary, sounded like she was trying to find, dare I say it, a suitable middle ground
100%.
of combining both efforts, which if we can't have all of one or all of the other, that's certainly what I'd like to see come out of it.
Yep.
And perhaps a hybrid of the two if we can't have one or the other alone. It's my belief that recommending ITL is a harmful disservice to New Hampshire's autism community.
I want to thank you for sharing your story and being
for sure.
so vulnerable. I just think it's so important, and I am disappointed, but I don't think the work here is done by any means.
And that's, as you mentioned that's why I wanted to make a quick aside here. Right after I saw the recommendation of the Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee on Wednesday afternoon, I reached out to a good mutual friend of ours, Louis Espito, who was on this very program in part number 2 with me, the executive director at ABLE New Hampshire, and I posed to him the following line of question. What is our next move here? What is the next step? How do we salvage at least something out of it? How do we make something of the effort, even though the committee wants to kill the bill and shut it down?
Right. And I think that's
What's the path forward here?
That's where we go next, right? Is we did not prevail right now, right?
I'd like to think of it as a significant setback, yes.
But,
and Louis pointed out to me, we're not nearly done.
Yeah. And I think
this is not over yet.
Right. And I think that's where we kind of gather up all of the information we need on how best to move forward strategically, and kind of get our key players in the mix and in the conversation about what are the next steps that we take.
And then I mean, Shauna already kind of said it already. In regard to the hearing itself, I wanted to just share a couple of thoughts here that I agree with what Representative Foss had to say about the bill in terms of the hearing, that she's exactly right, that it was about not just the data privacy angle of it, but fundamental protecting rights of the New Hampshire autistic community.
Yeah. And I want to bring go ahead.
And hold that thought for just a moment, because this is what bothered me about the hearing itself, was the honorable gentleman on the committee who was trying to insist that there is a link between vaccines and autism. We touched on this a little bit earlier too. There is still no link.
Yeah.
As I said already, multiple times, and pardon me for sounding like a broken record, there's no link. Anytime it came up in these studies, it was statistically insignificant.
I just wanted to bring up when I was going to say earlier that we have Gen Court, which we use to sign in on bills, and I did not look at as it closed out on February 4th. I did not look at close to midnight, but when I looked at the opposition versus the support, I want to bring to people's that 10 to 1 people
Easily,
supported this bill. And so last I looked, there was nearly high 400s in support, and then there was around maybe 30 to 40 in opposition. And some of those in opposition actually made a mistake because they misread the bill and they wrote testimony in support but hit opposition. And so what I want to say to people is also the constituents are speaking, but they're not being heard. And so that is a huge issue that could have a whole other segment.
And that raises a question in my mind too, that if we're in the neighborhood of, and I looked this up myself, if we're in the neighborhood of 450 in favor, and like you said yourself, 40 to 50
not even
in
that,
opposition.
Yeah, the last I looked.
If even that.
Right, and I don't have the final numbers. I don't have the final numbers. We could probably figure it out.
The people of New Hampshire
spoke
very loudly,
and there was
very
a lot of testimony
in favor.
Yes.
And by recommending ITL, like we talked about here just a moment ago, the committee basically thumbed their nose at us and said, too bad.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I have a problem with this. And that's why I'm not ready to give up, though. Because we had 400 to almost 500 people saying that this is a good idea. This is a common sense idea that we should be looking into.
Yeah.
And I'll make an additional note about the hearing that Kristen Evans of Pelham, who is Able New Hampshire's policy director and with me on part number 3, presented an excellent discussion of the current environment and basically answering the question of what the harm is, what's at stake without this. And actually, Sean, I gave you a bit of a shout out here. Acknowledging the fact that, like me, it takes a lot to look within yourself and share your story when we are at such a serious and dangerous turning point in this country. And I'd like to paraphrase a quote that I heard Governor Walz make in regard to Minneapolis. This is not a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. It's an issue of our humanity. It is an issue around the very identity of our country right now. And I don't care if people on the other side of the aisle, on the other side of the fence, call me names over it, disagree with me on everything else. We should not be trying to copy Nazi Germany. We should not be aspiring to mimic them in any way. A main reason for this program is not just about the educational value and the esteemed guests that I've had on so far. It's also about how can we be inclusive of people who are not like us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and the rest of the statement The rest of both statements I've put up on the Evan's Own Words page on Facebook. Quick additional note, again, see the Facebook page for the full details, House Bill 1337, which we referenced in part number 2 regarding repealing the New Hampshire Autism Council and being taken up by committee. Evan's Own Words Facebook page has the full details, link at the lower right. Oh, somehow okay, how did that happen? First order of business, we're talking about the Autism Data Protection Bill one more time. How did we get here? It reported out of the Health, Human Services, Elderly Affairs Committee back in mid-February. The committee recommended an expedient to legislate, which would effectively kill the measure had they passed that motion this week. Minority recommendation of ought to pass. There is a bit of an awkward situation with House Bill 1316 and 1593, which we're about to get into here. Overall House vote. Oh wait, the New Hampshire Republicans adjourned session yesterday to recess before they voted on it. As of midnight this morning, the bill died with no House roll call vote being taken.
Right.
How did our Hudson representatives vote? Oh wait, same problem. The New Hampshire House Republicans refused to allow a vote on it. 1593, House Judiciary Committee this time. It would have enshrined the non-discrimination protections from Section 504 into New Hampshire law. Majority recommendation interim study. Minority recommended ought to pass. Full House vote. Notice a theme here. New Hampshire Republicans refused to allow a vote on it yesterday.
Shocking.
This measure also died with no action being taken. How did our state reps here in Hudson vote for it? Oh yeah, did I say notice a theme here?
They couldn't vote on it. Wasn't allowed.
Because they adjourned session before a vote was allowed.
Correct.
All right, so of course, since we have spent so much time on this program talking about the two measures, I have just a few things to say. On the second day of a 2-day marathon, New Hampshire House Republicans blocked the effort to pass House Bill 1316 and 1593. On Thursday afternoon, the New Hampshire House was placed in recess and will not reconvene until session is called by the chair. The New Hampshire House Republicans are refusing to vote upon House Bill 1316 and 1593. This is a cowardly move, and it is a disservice to the residents of New Hampshire and constituents right here in Hudson. I call upon our New Hampshire viewers and followers to vote out all the New Hampshire House representatives. It is apparent that after the last 2 days, they are more concerned about following what the National Republican Party is telling them to do and what the Trump administration is telling them to do, rather than actually represent their constituents.
Yeah, and you're a constituent, Ian.
Oh,
You're
very
a
much so.
constituent, and there are so many constituents that are impacted by this and whose voices are not being listened to.
Oh, for sure. The refusal to allow a vote on House Bill 1316 and 1593 is extremely appalling. The refusal to allow a vote on House Bill 1593 puts the disabled community of our state at the whims of whatever propaganda and misrepresentation the Trump administration comes up with next. And we have covered this in relation to the autism community on this very program in at least 5 to now 6 of all 6 segments to date. Their refusal to allow a vote on House Bill 1316 means that the autistic community of our state are still subject to being put on a national registry, like we saw with Nazi Germany.
Yep.
Refusing to allow the New Hampshire House to vote on House Bill 1316 means that the members of the autistic community in New Hampshire don't have full control and say over how their medical data is being used. That is absolutely disgusting and disrespectful to people, toward people like me. The statement is what I put together this morning in reaction to the Thursday actions of our New Hampshire House.
Yeah.
Sarah, if you wish to weigh in,
Yeah, thank
please
you,
do.
Ian. I mean, it is incredibly disheartening, appalling, abhorrent that the New Hampshire Republicans are not taking strong measures to protect the citizens that they represent here in New Hampshire.
Oh, definitely.
And that is a number of constituents. This is not something that is, let's come back to this on a rainy day, right? This is something that has been front and center in this movement of legislation, in this session at the State House, and something that we as a community have been working really hard to raise awareness around. And people people have come out, spoken up about this. There is a majority that is in favor, very clearly, of how to move on these bills.
Oh, for sure.
And seeing this happen makes me feel like those that are elected in those leadership positions in Concord, in our State House, are not digging deep into their own personal courage, like you said. Instead, they're following party lines that are given to them, and they're not representing the people.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
And
right.
I mean, that is a point that I have struggled to find the correct way to diplomatically criticize them on in now 5 of the last 6 programs.
Yeah.
Because House Bill 1316, the Autism Data Protection Bill, and also House Bill 1337, the effort to repeal the New Hampshire Autism Council, has been a cornerstone of our discussions on this program.
Right.
Since part number 2, which we featured in early January with State Rep Foss and Louis Espedo, Executive Director of ABLE New Hampshire, on that particular afternoon.
Right. So how do you see this moving forward, Ian?
That is an excellent question, and I will go as far as to say that I've already been in contact over the last day or so with leaders in our disability community, like Sarah, like Lewis, like Representative Howard, and also chair of the Neurodivergent Caucus, Adam Thompson of Nashua,
Right.
in discussing that, okay, we look at this past week, we look at what actually happened this last week. It is far from the result that we were hoping for. It is perhaps one of the ugliest possible outcomes we could possibly have ended up with.
Right.
But also, more importantly, what is the next move? How do we play the long game, as Adam would vouch to?
Right.
How do we look at the big picture?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And how do we now hold individuals that are in leadership positions accountable for ignoring their constituents?
Oh, for sure, right?
Yeah.
And that's very true right here in Hudson and Litchfield, certainly, where our program is based, but that is true across the state also.
I agree.
Now we get into an update on House Bill 1337, the effort to repeal the New Hampshire Autism Council, which reported out of the House Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee last week. with a recommendation of ought to pass, minority recommendation of inexpedient to legislate. On Wednesday afternoon of the two-day session, the full House voted to pass the repeal effort on a party line vote of 178 to 155 in favor of the ought to pass recommendation. It gets better. I will have something to say on this here in a moment. And again, as I did with the other two pieces of legislation, how did our reps for Hudson Litchfield vote? Every single one of them, whopping total of 8, voted in favor to repeal the council. And that Representative Dumont voted for it. Kenny voted for it. Prout for it. Jeremy Salati, which after hearing him at school board deliberative session, I have little respect for. I admit it. Because he was spewing propaganda there too. Representative Ullery voted for the repeal. Bob Weary, also of our budget committee here in town, voted for the repeal. Ralph Boehm of Litchfield, same thing. Kimberly Rice, also on our budget committee here in town, same thing. In the first of the two-day marathon, the New Hampshire House session brought up House Bill 1337 for a vote. The vote was in favor of repeal, 178 to 155. This vote is very concerning because it would repeal the New Hampshire Autism Council based on Republican-driven talking points, concerns about inefficiencies, and propaganda. The New Hampshire House Republicans have chosen to ignore the fact that the Autism Council has attempted to correct the inefficiencies that were identified. Additionally, the bigger concern regarding the repeal being done is there is no plan to replace the council. They are simply repealing it for sake of propaganda and talking points. They have no plan for what would take its place. Oh, we'll take what the Autism Council does and put it on the shoulders of the Disability Quality Council. Fun bit of behind the scenes, we're going to have a segment on what each council actually does coming up here in a couple weeks. Finally, I am absolutely disgusted and angry to see that Hudson/Litchfield's 8 state representatives voted for the repeal and again deliberately ignored the citizens and constituents they represent and instead followed scapegoating of autistic people. Writing autistic people and autism out of New Hampshire government and state law does not make it go away. The statement I put out across our social media platforms yesterday morning in response to Wednesday's vote. Again, Sarah, if you would.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I think my question is back to you, honestly, because you know, as we're watching this unfold, and now we've seen the leadership of our state government sideline any bills that would be in favor of protecting that community, protecting us, and then we see them voting on a bill that further sidelines the community that they serve. How does that make you feel as a constituent, Ian?
I'm going to point out two things here, and one of which, in regard to the autism data privacy bill that we talked about at the top of the program, I actually made written testimony
Right.
submitted it to
Yeah.
the Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee in February. It was ignored. By the time the executive sessioned the bill in mid-February, Representative Mazer and McDonald had already made up their minds on what they were going to do about it.
Yeah.
That bill had overwhelming support.
Right.
And as Shauna and I discussed in part number 4,
Right.
it was a ratio of 10 to 1 in favor of the measure. It wasn't even close.
This is exactly what
For
I'm
one.
saying, right? Yeah, exactly.
Second, now we fast forward and pivot to House Bill 1337 regarding the Autism Council. Again, overwhelming opposition to the attempt to repeal the council because of the servicing
Right.
and information that the council provides for our state.
Right. So I want to be clear. This overwhelming support to not have this legislation pass was to support the council continuing.
For sure.
So I just want to be clear with everybody. That's what this was let's keep this council going. This is an important thing to have to represent our community and be inclusive and open channels and bring constituents into the program and have those voices heard.
Oh,
right,
for sure.
Ian? Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
want to, and talking with folks like Sarah, Representative Howard, who we featured in part number 3,
Yep.
and also Adam Thompson of Nashua, we were all in agreement that, okay, yes, the council was far from perfect, but they had taken measures to right the ship.
Right.
They had taken measures to get their feet back under them. And then to find out that our very own New Hampshire House has turned around and voted for a repeal of the council.
Right.
Simply because there's no excuse.
Well, they're not listening to the
Especially
voice
now.
of the people,
Yeah.
right, Ian? They're not listening to the voice of the people, and so
Oh, for sure.
we're seeing leaders in the state house not listening to what the citizens of the state want to see.
Oh, for sure.
And so I think that's a really important piece here, is that there was overwhelming support to not pass this legislation, to keep the council intact, and to further develop the council, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was certainly among the chorus saying that, okay, far from perfect, that's a fair assessment, yes. They were working on it, though.
Right.
They were trying to correct the issue,
Right. Right.
but instead they're getting sidelined over what? Propaganda and talking points.
Well, and certainly not based on, and I'll say it again and again, not based on what constituents are very clearly expressing as important.
Oh, for
to them.
sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's doubly frustrating when earlier this week I contacted every single one of those 8 individuals that I mentioned at the top
Yeah.
by email.
Right.
Not only did I not get a reply, at least in the case of the Autism Council, they went ahead and did whatever they were told to do, rather than listen to people like me.
Right. And they represent you.
Exactly.
Right.
All right. Now that we've gotten the, then we get into everybody's favorite topic, the New Hampshire legislature. Goodness. In this next part, we're going to be talking a little bit more about what has happened so far since the session was just getting underway when Louis and I were here last time.
Yeah.
So checking in on A, what's happened, and B, where do some of our collective priorities stand in terms of, have they moved forward? Are they tabled? What the situation is here? And then we'll get into some of the bills that Abel opposed in the first half of the session. Louis, if you would.
Yeah, so we follow, at the start of the legislative season when the initial LSRs came out, we had about 400 on our plate that we were looking at. And obviously at that point it's too much for, our organization to kind of follow each and every one of them. So we had to kind of wind them down. But we focus on categories like housing, voting rights, transportation, disability justice rights, equity, and education. So some of the bills that you see here are kind of all spread out. But one is, HB 1815, which redefines the adequacy of what a school is supposed to provide a student. And it doesn't necessarily seem like it's a disability bill, but it absolutely is, because every student that receives supportive education services through special education is a general education student first. And when we start reducing what an adequate education looks like, the expectations become less and less to support those students, which is one of our biggest fears. HB 1792 is another one that we're really worried about. That one is banning LGBTQ plus and CRT content in public schools, and has a lot of legal ramifications behind it too. It also allows for, if a teacher gets or is saying the wrong thing, could be wrongfully, it's a mess. I guess check that one out yourselves, guys.
Oh yeah, for sure.
1788 voids DEI contract, and I think that's a misconception that disability does not fall under the DEI umbrella.
It very much does.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion are three of the things that we focus on within our organization.
Exactly.
And we're very worried, and we've seen some of the repercussions of this. Like some of the DEI provisions. Would they prevent a school from, learning more about neurodivergent students? Would they prevent a school from, learning more about how autistic students might need different supports and having specialized training on that? So we're very nervous about how that looks. Talked about 1337, HB 1196. Housing is a significant issue for every Granite Stater. And it's consistently polling at one of the top issues and concerns for people that live here and want to afford here and grow up and live and have families and be part of communities. And this would repeal the Housing Champion Program, which supported different housing developments. And we're very nervous that that one's going to get through. 1778, personal identity theology. That's another one that we are concerned with too, based off the DEI conversations. And another one was HB 1754, which is the repealing the multi-tier structural system of support for behavioral health in schools. There are a lot of different bills. This was just a small list, I feel.
Oh, for sure.
There's other bills like centralized locations for to receive specialized services in schools, increasing restraint and seclusion in schools, all things that really affect the disability community. So we've been following a lot of these bills, and some bills have, are going to keep going, and some bills that we were opposed to are gone. So we still have our work to cut out with the second half of the legislative season.
Oh yeah, very much so, and that's certainly why once again I brought 1337 up, basically at the top of the program this afternoon, to highlight that that's just one of multiple that is still continuing on.
Yeah. And we had some bills that we supported too. We like to move forward and champion some of the causes that we're behind. And some of these bills were some of the ones that we supported. HB 1593 was something that we're really passionate about this year, which would have codified 504 supports into New Hampshire state law. Right now, what we're seeing is the federal government's ability to listen to civil rights complaints that someone's 504 might not have been protected is pretty much 90% of what they used to do. So a very small fraction are actually getting heard. So we're worried about that. We wanted to bring that to New Hampshire, and New Hampshire has a long history of bipartisan support for causes like this. And it was essentially wanted to be brought to a interim study period, but it was unfortunately tabled because it wasn't voted on a couple weeks back. Right to know exceptions. I mentioned that briefly with the Autism Council. There are a lot of people with disabilities that are not able to participate in government-run organizations like the Quality Council or Autism Council, and
for sure,
even like school boards and other municipality organizations, right? And how could you participate if your health prevents it, if you're taking care of a loved one with a disability and you can't get the respite that you need, and or if transportation is a barrier. And this would have allowed people to participate in these. And this is our second year supporting this bill, and it was another bill that was quickly ITL'd and put out the pasture, I guess. report on increasing disability housing lending practices, disability-related service and support. So as you can see, there's a lot of bills that we were following.
Definitely a common theme there, but do continue.
Commission to study supportive or study assistive technology. That was one that it passed the House, and we're really excited about that one, which would look at different assistive technology, which is anything that would support somebody to improve their way to work or live in their homes. It could be something as basic as your eyeglasses. That's assistive technology in some way.
Sure.
Things like as advanced as an AAC communication system. So it's a really wide range. And, with the prevalence of things like the like 3D printers now, there's so much availability, and the technology is getting cheaper and cheaper and more accessible. So this is going to be a great opportunity to really kind of focus on how we could support people with disabilities throughout their whole lives with different types of assistive technology. So we're really excited about that one. And we'll get to 670 later, and that's another one that we've been following.
Well, that's going to be a little bit more,
Yeah.
more of a discussion here in a moment.
Yep, both of those two bills again, yeah. But, one of the things that we keep seeing over and over again, and if you look at the previous slides, you see the percentages of online testimony. And there's a reason why we put those in there today, is because there seems to be a very big disconnect between what the online portal system is saying and the amount of testimony coming out to support or oppose these bills and what our legislative branches are currently doing. So,
and then what eventually said in executive session, at least with the New Hampshire House side of it, it's on record. You can find the playbacks of that on YouTube, and that's at least in part the reason why I called out Representative Manger so harshly on 1316 when their executive session came up, because there is very much a disconnect this session, like Lewis is saying, and Sarah and I talked about this last time. House Bill 1316, for example, the autism data privacy, 11 out of every 12 people were for it. And the committee partisanly recommended ITL because they were concerned what the federal administration would do if we passed it. I'm not making this up. Look, honestly, look back at the YouTube playbacks. That's exactly their point.
And I think, part of the legislative process too is, what makes New Hampshire really unique and really great is that, your voice counts, your voice matters. Every bill has a hearing. There are 400 House of Representatives, so you can have a conversation with them a lot easier than someone that's representing, thousands of more people. And we have multiple ways to express our opinions on bills, including emails, calling you up, finding your legislator in the grocery store, things like that. But one of the
or finding them on town voting day, which small world that in fact happened with me.
Happens a lot, yeah.
I was voting in the town and school election a couple weeks ago, and Board of Selectmen Chair Dylan Dumont happened to be running check-in in his official town capacity, no less. Now, after some of the things we've talked about on the program and how they've chosen to represent us, I chose not to engage in conversation because I felt that there was nothing polite that could have been said in a public setting. So
and I hear the frustration, but I really do think that is, I'm going to push back at that a little bit. I do think it's a great way to just have that face-to-face. I'm Ian, I could have that conversation with my representative. And, we do it all the time, and we encourage a lot of people to do that. But it is intimidating, and it is, sometimes you do get really frustrated about how your representative votes. But it's also important to let them know that, hey, I saw what you did and I don't agree, because there's, like we said, there's multiple ways of representing, going to the State House and submitting online testimony, reporting online testimony, but the most important way is the vote, which is the one voice that they can't quiet.
And reporting back upon it, which slightly unintentionally what I've endeavored to do with this very program. And Lewis and I have talked about multiple times in this session already that, okay, it's not what I intended it for, but this whole platform gives me a little bit of a unique position.
Absolutely.
And okay, it's been a work in progress, but still
You're
trying
doing
to
great.
find
You're
the
doing great.
right way to call out what's been going on.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be said, it needs to be spotlighted.
I agree 100%.
As we've seen in the past couple of slides, too.
Yeah. So just a couple bills to highlight here. HB 1815, that was a bill that you talked about earlier that changes the whole, what an adequate education looks like. That passed both the House and the Senate. 99% of the people that testified online were against the bill. And it passed both the House and the Senate and could be signed by Governor Ayer as early as today. The 1792, 78% against, 1788, 97 against. And the most ironic one is 1114, which would have allowed the public input to be on the permanent record, which was also tabled and put away. But, just to emphasize that, this is a way for people with disabilities to communicate their thoughts on bills. And I know there's a lot of other reasons why someone would do it, but specifically talking about disability community, getting to the State House is tricky.
Oh, for sure.
Transportation and timing of things too. Having a hearing at 9 a.m. is not always feasible for somebody.
Or purposely, like with House Bill 1316, for example,
Yeah.
waiting for mid-afternoon
Yeah. It's tricky. Yeah.
for both the hearing and then the eventual executive session that they had upon it. And as we said in part number 6, the full House never actually did
Yeah.
get around to voting on it. And that's just certainly one of many examples we've talked about already today.
There are plenty.
And I think, like I've said with part number 6, it's absolutely cowardly and disgraceful that that's what we're seeing right now. And I'm looking ahead, certainly into the second half of the legislative session and later on in the year as a whole. My concern is it's going to continue because we're not necessarily going to fix this issue this year.
Well, I think it's just also important to just, raise it up. I think people
For
are talking
sure.
about this more and more. And, this is another opportunity to, hey, you could actually sort on the online testimony portal how your town voted, just categorize it by, alphabetical order with town. And you can see all the people from Hudson and Litchfield and other areas, how they voted and kind of
For
compare
sure.
to, what their legislators voted.
And certainly Hudson, Litchfield, I highlighted those on purpose because that's where our program
Yep.
is based here and felt that was the most relevant. Let's see. Now now we get to the not so good news, the things that we were
Yeah.
striving for but came up short for
And
whichever reason, whichever excuse,
and it's
however you want to
frustrating.
put it here.
It is frustrating. If you look here, you can see like some of the bills that were really supported had overwhelming support, and they were not progressed. So, or move forward. So, like I said, it's another opportunity to let your legislators know, that if you, agree or disagree with some of these bills or the bills that you're following, or that care about, let them know.
For sure. And I mean, we went over some of these already in terms of what they actually do, but I mentioned this to Lewis electronically before today's program that 1316, the autism data privacy, medical data privacy as a whole, is a big motivator for me and part of the catalyst for this very program. Because I look around us and I look at, okay, yes, technology is evolving. That's good and bad for the individuals that we advocate for and speak on behalf of. But also it raises an area of concern too. And I look back at things as common with what happened with St. Joseph's Hospital in Nashua and them having a sizable data breach last year.
Yeah, I remember that.
As technology is evolving, there is an inherent risk behind it. And then you want to take the other side of that and go back to the autism registry we mentioned at the top. There's a whole other layer of issues there too. And to, A, are they asking people like me to use the information? Are they asking people like State Representative Foss for the information? Between ourselves, my suspicion would be no. And B, is that what they would actually use it for?
Yeah.
Or as we've seen in other arenas, other disciplines, does it just get shuttled to a whole other federal agency too? That's another
Yeah.
big concern at the moment.
No, I hear you. Very concerning.
Now with 1815, you did kind of give us a spoiler on
Yeah, it's
there could be additional development as soon as
Yeah, I mean, this is a little
later
bit
on in the
outdated
day
too.
and for
Like
recording.
it's now it's out of the Senate now. It's actually heading to Governor Ayoutte's desk.
Indeed. And then now we kind of look at
Yeah.
a couple of things that we're looking ahead towards in addition to 1337, which is still very much
Yeah.
in the equation, very much in the discussion. Senate Bill 101 in regard to open enrollment, they had a hearing this past Wednesday afternoon on it. And from my understanding, from reliable sources, there's going to be a part 2 that's next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday morning, that's right.
And it's when they're going to resume the hearing.
Yeah.
So
This one, I mean, there's a handful of bills that we're following. This one is, I think it's really important for just how we view education in our state. What is very alarming is how fundamentally it could potentially shift how education is run all over our state. And what open enrollment does, it allows for, and every town lately has been voting on open enrollment, and it's becoming more and more of a common thing. And usually the town gets to vote on how many, if we allow open enrollment, yes or no, yes. And if you do, how many seats can go out and how many seats come in. And you've probably seen that in some of the, I'm not sure if Hudson did it, I'm not sure if Litchfield did it.
I don't recall if we did on the latest go around or
Yeah.
not. We had
Plenty of bills out
We
there.
had a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff going on. Somewhere around 35 different warrant 35 or 37 different warrant articles between school and
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
town this last go around a couple weeks ago.
But open enrollment, would allow a student to apply to any school in the state. So theoretically, you could have a student from Hudson that wants to go to Salem, or a student from Londonderry that wants to come to Hudson. And fundamentally, that's,
Or the other way around,
Yeah,
for example, yeah.
And I think what makes, and other states have had this model, but what makes New Hampshire unique is we are 50th in state funding towards education. Everything's now localized, right? Like with local property taxes. So this would allow for local funds to go to different schools. So I'll give you an example, and trying to put a more special education perspective, supportive education perspective on it. If you have a student in Hudson that does not want to attend Hudson school districts anymore, and they want to attend, let's say Salem. How far is to Salem from here? About 30 minutes?
Approximately that, yeah.
They would have to apply to Salem High School, and there's 4 criteria that they base their applications on. It's about your attendance, it's about your disciplinary record, and I'm sorry, the other 2 are escaping me right now. But one of the things that you don't include is your IEP or a 504 or anything like that. So you could have a student go to Salem High School, and they get to Salem High School, and now all of a sudden this student's IEP follows. The sending district is responsible for the IEP. So Hudson will still need to have that IEP and be in charge of it. And Hudson would still also need to pay for the expenses within the IEP. So the services that are inside of it, including speech, OT, PT, the educators, paraprofessionals, all that money is now going to go to Salem High School to pay for those things.
Sure.
So fundamentally, it could be exceptionally expensive. And vice versa, let's say you have a student from Londonderry that comes to Hudson. Great. There's a couple open spots in the 4th grade, but you don't know who that student is. And all of a sudden they come and they have, let's say, a 504 because they have FM communication systems. Let's say Hudson's not prepared for that. Now all of a sudden Hudson is responsible to provide this FM communication system to the student, which is rather costly. And if you say to a student, no, you can't come because we can't support your needs, that's discrimination. Now you're opening up potential lawsuits. This could be a really expensive thing for a lot of school districts. And I think the the loss in between is the student who might not be getting the services and supports that they're waiting. You could have a disagreement between the two schools. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. So I'm very nervous about this one and what it could mean to supportive education, education in general.
And I mean, it would certainly, if it came up for a vote here in town, it would be a point of contention. Because among other things, we were arguing amongst ourselves at town deliberative session, and Mike and Matt, who are currently behind the camera at the moment, can attest to. We were arguing about hiring firefighters, for goodness sake.
And this wouldn't even be.
That's not even related.
And the thing is, as of right now, open enrollment is actually legal in New Hampshire. It's up to the towns to decide. And this bill would actually make it. It would take the say from the town completely away. It wouldn't matter anymore. So it opens it up for everybody, regardless of what this town says.
And I mean, I'm going to defer on that. I'm sure Mike Johnson, our director of community media here in Hudson, or Matt can enlighten me, but I don't believe that that's come up here in Hudson, at least at this point, in terms of where we weigh in upon that.
Yeah, I don't know either. I should have done my research a little bit better, but it is something that, if SB 101 passes, regardless of what the residents of Hudson thinks, it would, be something they would have to address. The other bill that we're following very closely is called SB 670, and this already passed the Senate and is currently in the House. And this bill was created in response to a series of articles that were created through by William Skipmore from the New Hampshire Bulletin. And in these articles that came out around November, they detailed and chronicled neglect and abuse within the disability system. If you haven't had a chance, please take a look, but also take a look from the perspective that it is actually really hard to read. In these articles are people being abused by their support staff, kicked, hit, yelled at, thrown on the floor, people dying in vehicles, left in the cars, and suffocated, people being found lost in, the woods. And I get chills just thinking about it, and, left because they weren't getting the right supports. And these were from situations a few years ago, but these are things that are happening right now. A recent article came out a few weeks back that detailed the abuses, or detailed the complaints that were filed and suspicious deaths from the months of, I believe it was June through December of this past year. This is still ongoing. And what this bill does is an attempt to help understand and provide more oversight of these abuse and neglect within the developmental disability system. So this is something that is very important for our communities. Obviously, this is a life or death situation for a lot of people, and it's a lot of reasons why people are very fearful of, when their son or daughter ages out of the school system at 22 and they have required support in that BDS system, why they're really nervous about what that could actually mean for their loved one. So this one's a really important one, and I encourage you all to take a look at some of the articles and follow it.
And I would not only echo what Lewis said about reading the actual articles themselves, I would also direct people to, I believe it was Wednesday of this past week, the New Hampshire House Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs Committee actually had a hearing on this very bill during their hearing day, and I would encourage people to refer to the YouTube playback as well. Now, yes, I know it's odd that I'm saying that because I've been very critical of that committee on this very program, but this goes beyond it. This is a fundamental human rights discussion, for lack of a better term. It's not partisan.
And there's going to be more, there's going to be more work, obviously, ahead, even if this bill passes. And I suspect it will. But there's right now the Quality Council is doing a series of stakeholder meetings about the various components of the developmental disability system and seeing why there are so many gaps. And I would suspect that there will be more, and I know the Disability Rights Center is also doing an internal investigation that as an organization, they have privy to information that, the public doesn't. They're doing an internal audit of some of their systems and the complaints and abuse. So there's going to be more things coming out about this. So this is still really at the start of kind of unraveling the larger issues within the developmental disability system. So yeah, it's a fundamental question, and I know. I taught at Alvern. I was a teacher for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they are now in the system. And so it is something that's very near and dear to me, that we are able to provide people with the right supports and staff to live and thrive in their community, not just, what we're currently, seeing from some of these articles.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't believe I've seen him yet this afternoon, but Mike Pylon, the other production coordinator here at HCTV and Alvern grad, like myself, some of our best friends are the individuals that Lewis and I are trying to uplift and speak up for, because either they're shy or they don't have quite the articulation skills that we do.
And I think that's part of the things that we're trying to as an organization and as a community and as a state and society, it's, how do we amplify those voices? And they might not always sound like you or I. They might come from a different form of communication, or there might be different ways to tell. But I think, it's something that we all need to just kind of sit back and wonder what we need to do better with.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that's a lot of the reason that I've risen to this calling, and some of my closest friends, certainly in high school, are in the very community, very demographic that we're talking about here. And as I was putting this PowerPoint together, and certainly last week, Able, New Hampshire put together the graphic you see on your screen here, and I think it's actually an excellent illustration of what both Shauna Hallberg and I talked about in part number 4, about there being a disconnect between what the constituency is saying and what our representatives are actually doing. And goodness knows, Sarah Shazinski and I talked about this 2 weeks ago when we were here. And it also gets into what Lewis and I have been talking about here this afternoon, that, I mean, you can see it on the screen here. The amount of support and opposition that these bills are getting on the New Hampshire General Court online testimony site is not being reflected in the overall vote on the House floor, not reflected in the committee decision making.
Yeah.
It's cowardly, it's disgusting, it's frustrating, but at that same time it's motivating, because it's pointing to what do we need to be doing better, or what do we need to be taking a different approach on to get people to understand, why does it matter? Why do they need to be getting behind it? And certainly we've highlighted a couple of these already today. Certainly right after the pre-crossover day House session a couple weeks ago, goodness knows, I was on the phone with Lewis and a couple of like-minded folks in our community, asking the question, what's next? Or how could we approach it differently going forward? Because whatever we did for the first half of the session, unfortunately, didn't come out or didn't come to pass. But that doesn't mean we should stop, because a lot of these are very crucial areas.
Yeah. And just to point out too, I know it's easy to get, frustrated with the legislative process, and, especially seeing things like this too. And, it's not a sign for, if you have a cause and something that you believe in, to give up, but it is an opportunity to kind of reevaluate where, like you said, what's next? What do we do now? And it's really kind of getting more and more like, you look at some of these numbers here, let's double those numbers. Let's
Some of them
triple
are
those numbers.
staggering, quite
Yeah.
frankly. I
And-
look at 1336, which has been a regular pillar of the program so far.
There's a lot we could be doing.
And it gets back to that comment I made about 11 out of every 12 people supported it,
Yeah.
or 10 out of every 11 for rough estimation
Yeah.
here, but the point stands.
It's just, you got to keep going. You got to keep grinding. Sometimes the bills that you really are passionate about and the causes, it takes years. And we could agree or disagree about why, but every time you have an opportunity to, do something like this or talk to your neighbor or, have a conversation with somebody about this issue and enlighten them, not about, the numbers, but enlighten them about the one issue that you're very invested in, and get more numbers for next year and keep growing, because, that's kind of what democracy is all about.